It was the kind of October morning that smelled like iron and wet sidewalks. The sky was gray, but clean quiet in a way that felt almost promising. Langston Miles stepped out of his mama's little shotgun house with polished shoes, pressed, pants, and a second-hand suit that didn't quite fit across the shoulders. He was 17, and this morning, he believed in new beginnings. His mama had stayed up late starching that suit. They didn't say much, just nodded at each other in the kitchen after the ironing was done. She kissed the back of his head and said, "You walk like you already got the job." That was all the blessing he needed. He walked 6 blocks to the number 7 bus. Downtown wasn't far, a junior teller job at the Citizens Federal Bank. Just a foot in the door. That's all he wanted. Something that didn't smell like fryer grease or bleach. Something he could be proud of. He kept one hand tucked in his coat pocket where the resume lived, folded 3 times. The other hand brushed off lint he couldn't even see. He was ready, but then came the siren. Not loud, just a quick, sharp whoop behind him. He stopped, turned. A black and white patrol car eased up beside the curb, to white officers inside. The older one stepped out first, bell creaking, hand already, hovering above his holster. "You," hands on the hood. Langston blinked. "What now?" He froze, tried to speak, but his voice got caught somewhere in his throat. He looked around, no one watching. Just him, the street, and the badges with hard eyes. He moved toward the car, cold metal under his palms. The second cop checked the radio. "We got a 10 to 64, male, black, late teens, brown suit, seen fleeing east on Franklin. That you?" The first one said, patting down his jacket. Langston turned his head, tried to meet his eyes. "I'm on my way to an interview." I didn't, but the words didn't matter. They never do. When your skin says something louder, the cuffs came fast. Cold steel on warm wrists. He hadn't run. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even moved, but none of that made a difference. They pushed him into the back seat like trash already bagged. His resume fluttered to the sidewalk, caught the wind, and blew into the gutter. He watched it disappear through the window as the car pulled away. You're watching Injustice Brown. I'm Mark Joie. If this moment hit you even a little, take a second to subscribe. Drop a comment below if you've ever felt the weight of being judged before you even open your mouth. Because what happens next, this ain't a story about guilt or innocence. It's about what happens when truth don't matter. Langston sat in the back seat, trying not to cry. He didn't want to give them that. He looked down at the scuff on his shoe, small, but it felt huge now, like the whole day had been cracked from the start. The suit pinched his collar. His hands started to go numb. One of the cops glanced back through the glass. "You got ID?" "In my wallet," Langston said, his voice barely a whisper. They didn't check it, just kept driving. The station smell, like bleach and cold metal. They took his prints, his belt, his shoelaces, tossed him in a holding cell with 3 other boys. Nobody said a word, just stared at the wall like they were trying to punch through it with their minds. Langston sat on the bench, fist clenched. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He thought about his mama, about the clock ticking in the bank lobby where he was supposed to be shaking hands, not sitting behind bars. All he could do was wait and wait and wonder if wearing that suit was the biggest mistake he ever made, because for a black boy in the South, dressed to clean on the wrong street, sometimes that's all it takes to become a suspect. Not a person, not a name, just a match to story they already wrote. And you don't even get a sentence in it. There's a silence that lives in jail cells, not the peaceful kind, not the quiet of rest. It's a heavier kind, like wet blankets soaked in hopelessness, draped across your chest. Langston Miles had been sitting under that weight for 3 days. He hadn't spoken much. Nobody really wanted him to. They gave him a single bologna sandwich and a juice box every night. He didn't even touch the sandwich the first 2 nights. He couldn't. His stomach was twisted up with something bigger than hunger, fear, shame, rage without a mouth. He'd been charged now. Felony armed robbery. They said he robbed a liquor store with a handgun, took $83 from the register, and ran down Franklin Street. The clerk, white, maybe late 40s, had pointed to a photo lineup and said, "That's him." That was it. No fingerprints, no weapon, no cash. Just a face and a hunch. Langston's face when the public defender showed up. He barely looked Langston in the eyes. His name was Mr. Garrett, tie crooked, bags under the eyes like he hadn't slept in a week. "I'll try to get you a deal," he said, flipping through the folder. "I didn't do it." Garrett didn't pause. "Yeah, I figured. Still, they got a witness. That's strong in this town. What about my alibi? I was on my way to an interview. My mama." He held up a hand. "Listen, we can bring all that up in court. But between us, it's your word against a shopkeeper. In this city, his word wins." Langston leaned back in the chair, his jaw locked tight. He didn't know whether to scream or stay silent. Neither seemed to make a difference anymore. Mama came to visit 2 days later. Her eyes were tired. Same blue smock from the diner, hair wrapped up in a scarf. She didn't cry. She just sat behind the glass, hands folded, and asked softly, "Did they even let you speak?" Langston shook his head. She sighed through her nose, picked at the edge of her fingernail. "I talked to Mr. Garrett. He says the bail's $5,000. I don't have it, baby. I'm sorry. I know. Mama, I'll keep trying. I know. They didn't say I love you. Didn't need to." It was in every pause between words, every glance through the bulletproof glass dot back in the cell. Langston shared the space with a man named Darnell, who talked in riddles and sang himself to sleep. Some nights, Langston stared at the cracks in the ceiling and wondered if this was where his life would end, not in death, but in erasure, just quietly forgotten. His dreams folded like that resume on the street. Officer Kenner was the one who arrested him. Younger than the other cop, thin face, looked more like a gym teacher than a cop. He walked past the cell one afternoon and glanced inside. Their eyes met, just for a second. Langston stood up. "Sir." Kenner stopped, but didn't step closer. "You think I did it?" Langston asked, voice low. Kenner looked away, then back, his mouth open, then closed again. Finally, he said, "I just bring him in, kid. I don't write the reports." He walked off. That was the closest thing to doubt Langston had heard, and even that came wrapped in fear. Kenner knew, or at least, he didn't know enough to believe. But it didn't matter. The gears had already turned. The report was typed. The charge was official. The process had begun. That's the thing about systems like this. They don't need loud racists, or evil villains, or snarling sheriffs with blood on their hands. They just need people who shrug, people who say, "Not my job," people who know better. But keep walking. Langston didn't fight the walls anymore. He started writing notes to himself in his head, memories, details, the way the cuffs felt, the face of the clerk, the timeline, his walk that morning, everything. He wanted to remember it all, not to prove it to them, but to himself, because the moment he let their version replace the truth was the moment they truly won. And deep down, he wasn't ready to hand them that kind of power. The suit didn't fit anymore. 3 months in lockup will change a boy. Shoulders get broader, jawline gets sharper. But nobody notices that part. All they see is the color of your skin, the charge on the docket, and the silent way you walk into court in handcuffs. Langston sat in the courtroom with his hands folded in his lap, wrists still red from the cuffs. The suit was wrinkled, the collar slightly yellowed. Mama had brought it to him in a paper bag, freshly pressed, but the starch wore off fast in a holding cell. He kept adjusting it, like maybe if he looked sharp enough, they'd see him different. But they did in single quotes T. The jury didn't see a scared kid who studied for his interview, who carried hope in his pocket like a sacred thing. They saw a young black male accused of armed robbery, and that's all they needed. The prosecutor was smooth, white, confident, wore a navy blue suit with cufflinks. He pointed to the lineup photo, told the jury, "This is what the witness saw, a match." He made it sound so clean, so obvious, a short story with no chapters, just an ending. Langston's public defender barely cleared his throat, fumbled, threw a few questions, called Mama up to testify. She tried, Lord knows she did, told them about the job interview, about the suit, about how he was home ironing when the robbery happened. But her voice cracked halfway through, and the jury turned to stone. Nobody wants to hear grief when it wears a waitress uniform and a headscarf. When it was Langston's turn to speak, he stood up, cleared his throat. The room felt like it was pressing down on his shoulders. The judge didn't look at him. The jury barely lifted their eyes. Still, he spoke. "I didn't rob nobody," he said. "I was on my way to get a job. That's all I ever wanted. I never even held a gun in my life. You don't have to believe me, but I'm telling the truth. That was it. No fireworks, no speeches, just one boy standing in a borrowed suit, telling the truth that nobody planned to hear. The verdict came down like bricks falling from the sky. Guilty. Felony armed robbery. 5 years. Mama gasped. She didn't scream, she just folded in on herself like the air had left her lungs. The bailiff reached for her gently and sat her down. Langston didn't move, didn't cry, didn't flinch. He just stared straight ahead. His pulse was a drumbeat. In his ears, they took him back down the corridor. Metal doors, fluorescent lights, rubber floors. The world blurred, but he didn't die in the holding area. The guard told him to remove his tie and hand it over. He did, slowly, like he was peeling off a piece of his own skin. The tie had been his father's. The cell they put him in was cleaner than the last one. For beds, concrete floor, one window high on the wall, too small to crawl through, but just big enough to remind you what daylight looked like. That night, while the others slept, Langston sat on the lower bunk and whispered to himself, I won't let them take me. He repeated it again. I won't become what they think I am. Because the real sentence wasn't 5 years. The real sentence was what they wanted to bury inside him. Bitterness, silence, shame, something cold and permanent. He wouldn't let them plant that. The boy in the glass box had been judged, boxed, filed away, but inside, something was still breathing, something they hadn't broken yet, and that was the part he decided to protect. There's a constant hum, buzzers, boots on tile, distant yelling, but the loudest part lives in your head, that ticking, that grinding thought that says, this is who you are now. Langston heard it every night, for months. At first, he barely spoke to anyone, ate slow, slept light, did what he was told. He was 17, stuck in a place built to crush men twice his age, but he watched, learned the rhythms, knew when to move and when to disappear. His cellmate was a mountain named Big Ray, must have been pushing 40, arms like oak trees, voice like gravel, but his eyes, they were tired, kind. Ray didn't talk much at first, just handed Langston the towel and said, you fold it tight, don't let him see your mess. It wasn't a threat, it was survival advice. Weeks turned to months. Langston found refuge in the one place nobody bothered him, books. The prison library was small, dusty, forgotten, but it had everything he needed. A couple of old law books to dictionaries, some torn GED prep manuals. He read like his life depended on it, because in some way, it did. He started with the basics criminal procedure, habeas corpus, wrongful conviction statistics. Then he moved to cases, footnotes, trial transcripts. He wanted to understand the machine that swallowed him, every lever, every screw. Sometimes he copied down quotes and taped them inside his bunk. One of them read, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. He underlined that word, long. One day, Big Ray leaned over from the top bunk and asked, why you reading all that lawyer mess? Langston didn't look up, trying to figure out how they did this to me. Ray nodded, stretched his arms. That's good, long as you don't forget who you are. They put us here, sure, but we still get to choose who we are every damn day. That line stuck to Langston's ribs like cornbread. From then on, he didn't just read. He started helping other inmates with their paperwork, appeal letters, grievance forms. He'd sit at the metal table in the day room, writing in small, neat print while the others watched TV or played spades. Some teased him for it, called him the lawyer. But when their time came to fight, they came to him, quietly, one by one. He never charged them, just made them promise to write back if they ever made it out. Most DID in single quotes. One night, after a long shift in the kitchen, Langston came back to his bunk and saw something strange. A paperback, left right on his sheet, not from the library, no markings, just a worn-out copy of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. No note, no name. He looked around, saw the guard on duty, Hollins, white, late 50s, hard eyes, never said a word. But that night, Hollins gave him a slow nod before turning his back. That book cracked something open, not with answers, but with recognition. Langston read it cover to cover, twice, and when he put it down, he wasn't just angry anymore. He was clear. They wanted him to rot in here, wanted him to get bitter, to get hard, to forget who he was before the cuffs. But he wouldn't, because no matter how long the sentence, no matter how loud the walls screamed, there was still a boy inside, staring out the window at a piece of sky, whispering to himself, "They didn't break me." And that whisper, it was louder than the noise. The gates didn't swing. They creaked, rusted hinges, slow moving, like they hated letting anybody out. Langston stood still as they opened, not eager, not shaking, just steady, a canvas bag in one hand, his paperwork in the other. 5 years had passed. His jaw was sharper now, shoulders broader. The suit was gone. Hadn't seen that since booking. Now it was state clothes, too big in some places, too tight in others. But his eyes, that was what had changed the most. They didn't search anymore. They studied. Mama was waiting by the curb, same scarf around her head, but now she had a cane, her frame smaller, her eyes wetter. When she saw him, she didn't run. She just opened her arms and said, "Come on, baby." Langston walked into that hug like it was the first warm thing he'd felt in years. They didn't talk much on the ride home. What was there to say? You lose 5 years in a place like that, and words don't grow back right away. But her hand stayed on his knee the whole time, like she was checking to make sure he was real. The next few months were plain. He stayed quiet, kept his head down, took a job cleaning office buildings downtown, night shifts, empty floors, just him, the mop, and the city lights outside. But he liked it. There was a calm to it, a kind of peace in wiping down glass and knowing you weren't invisible anymore. He took classes on the weekends, community college, paralegal certification. Nobody paid attention to the quiet man in the back row until he started acing every test. He studied the way he used to read law books in that tiny library like the words could save him. And maybe they did. 3 years later, he passed the final exam, got a certificate with his name spelled right. He took it home, taped it on the wall next to a photo of him and Mama at the bus stop. She was smiling. He wasn't, but not because he was unhappy. Some victories don't look like joy. They look like survival. They look like silence broken by breath. It wasn't long after that when a case came across his desk. Kid named Diane, 17, arrested for armed robbery. No weapon, no prints, just a shaky eyewitness and a skin tone that matched. Langston looked at the case file for a long time before saying anything. He met with the kid, told him to breathe, told him not to lie, told him not to give up. Then he got to work, filed motions, dug up inconsistencies, showed up in court clean-shaven, no flash, just facts. The boy sat in the same glass box Langston once knew, same slouched shoulders, same nervous hands. But this time, something was different. This time, somebody was speaking for him. Langston didn't yell, didn't grandstand. He laid the truth down like bricks, one by one, when the judge dismissed the case. The courtroom let out a gasp. The boy's mother wept. The DA frowned. Langston just packed up his files, but as he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of someone in the back row. Officer Kenner, older now, retired, maybe, civilian clothes, same quiet eyes. They locked eyes for a second. The air felt heavy with memory. Langston nodded once. Kenner didn't return it, just looked away. Langston didn't care. He stepped out of the courthouse, papers in hand, sunlight on his face. The city buzzed around him like it always had, indifferent, impatient, alive. But this time, he didn't feel behind it. He felt in it. He walked toward the bus stop where Mama once waited for him, where he dreamed of a life beyond mops and orange jumpsuits, where he first learned what it meant to be seen as a threat just for wearing a suit. Now, he didn't need a suit. He had his name back, and this time, he was the one writing the story. Not for revenge. Not for applause, but because somebody had to, and it may as well be the boy they tried to silence, still standing, still breathing, still free.